Very, very subtle day here in Asia. Not surprising, we didn't see a huge amount of news coming out of the US last night, only saw the factory numbers and they were a slight head of expectations at 0.7 versus 0.4, but that really hasn't affected Asian trade at all. Looking at the Nikkei, it's still the only major positive light over in this region. It's held above the 15,000 point level and continues to move on, and the one to watch there is certainly the dollar yen. It's also now starting to shift higher. It's currently trading around about 102.4, and that is a nice little move indeed as we really do look towards the end of the week with that pair, particularly the non-farm payrolls overnight and also the official numbers on Friday are certainly going to drive that pair, and it looks like positioning, so expectations suggest that things might be quite positive. The rest of the region, however, is in a negative spiral still. Even though we've seen better than expected Chinese data, the Chinese bourses continue to shift lower. And if we have a look at Shanghai copper, that's dropped around about 1.3%, taking it down almost 3% for the week. We've seen a slight bounce, but not a huge one in iron ore, and that continues to be a concern for the entire region. And then if we look across Southeast Asia and also into Australia and New Zealand, those bourses also are still in contractionary movements as well. So it's not a huge sort of change of data, it's not a huge movement, but that is certainly the case. The other major data that came out of Asia today was what happened in Australia. Really much better than expected GDP figures, and we saw a really big jump in the first quarter at 1.1% versus estimates of 0.8. That was a surprise, but again, this is because we saw better than expected exports, particularly from the mining space, as we see a real ramp up in iron ore exportation, and that really did drive it. And if you look underneath it, it was actually quite a fairly dull affair, and the Aussie dollar really reflects how that was seen. Popped up very, very strongly, jumped almost 40 pips on the news, but has traded all the way back to the same level we saw this morning, and that's probably a suggestion that, again, it's not the strongest sort of outlook we've seen. So they were the big moves in Asia today. It's certainly going to be a quiet day for the rest of what we see. Tomorrow morning will be interesting to see what happens in the US, particularly ADP, also ISM manufacturing numbers and services numbers that will drive Asia tomorrow. Asia tomorrow is definitely going to be led by what we see in the US overnight. It wouldn't surprise me to see a fairly flat day of trading once again as we really do gear up to Thursday night with the ECB and then Friday night from the US with the non-farm payrolls. We are seeing some data tomorrow night, or tonight for us here in Asia, that will be effective tomorrow. I think looking at the ADP gives you a bit of a gauge to what to expect on Friday. We also see their services PMI data coming out, which is always a really big driver of the US dollar, so that may be a bit of a mover, but it's going to be a fairly flat day as there is a lot of anticipation of what's happening at the ECB. Mario Draghi basically has to do something, or Asian markets and the world over will obviously move in the opposite direction along with the euro. Other thing to watch tomorrow will continue to be the dollar yen. It is continuing to shift higher, and that is the medium-term view that we certainly believe that you will see a higher dollar yen by the end of the year, and it's finally looking like it may be breaking out of what has been a fairly tight range for almost 3 months, and that again gets back down to positive US data. So that's where we're looking tomorrow. Will be probably a fairly flat trading day indeed as we move into Thursday and Friday.